What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home. I am your host, Kyle Robert. You follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me once again to break down a NFL show, not a NASCAR show. Let me fix that. Bingo! It's Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Kyle? Yeah, today's show I'm actually really excited for, as this is kind of my area of not to say expertise, but something I practice fairly often in redraft leagues, and that's going dumpster diving for QBs.
Yeah, I love to find late round options that can
Yes.
thrive, that can make a big stride, and there's four names we're gonna get into for sure, and then I think we'll rapid fire a few names at the end because, like the last couple of years, it's been incredibly interesting to see who is kind of hanging around once you get past the top 12 or 15 options. And then just depending on what kind of risk you want to take on, or in one quarterback leagues, it's a lot easier to draft one of these guys and then punt on them, and then go to another option, kind of hanging around the waiver wire, or in two quarterback leagues, if you're looking for a second quarterback, a lot of these names could make sense in that format as well. But Brian, I want to dive into my first name, and this is a guy that, when everybody is on him, I tend to run and hide. And then when everybody is off of him, I tend to be on board. And that's Matt Ryan. He's going as QB 15, 116 overall. You can sometimes get him later than that. I've been doing some best ball drafts where he's been falling. I've seen his ADP kind of in that 15, 16, 17 range, but I'm not really sure what we're doing here. This is a guy that everyone was on board with last year, drafted him as like a top 10 option. Yes, he lost Julio Jones, but Calvin Ridley stepped up and was a wide receiver one last year, top 5 at his position. We like what Russell Gage can be. Olamide Zacchaeus, another late round flyer that people are taking shots on. Oh, and then they
great
added
pronunciation, by the way.
What's that?
That was great pronunciation,
Yeah,
by the way.
I'm going to pretend like I nailed that perfectly. So, and then Kyle Pitts, who is being drafted as a top 5 option at the tight end position, that everybody thinks is in line for 70 catches, 1,000 yards, potentially hit double-digit touchdowns. Like those are reasonable expectations. Maybe he doesn't hit all of those, but they're definitely in line. And then Mike Davis, who stepped in for Christian McCaffrey, was top 15 option, catch passes. I guess if we don't believe in Ryan, then we should downgrade the rest of the offense accordingly. But if we believe that Calvin Ridley can be the wide receiver one, which I do, and I've been drafting him as such, if we think Kyle Pitts can be a top 5-ish option at the tight end position, if we think Mike Davis can be a usable RB2 on most weeks, Matt Ryan should be, in that QB1 discussion. And honestly, he has the upside in this offense, especially with the defense as bad as it is, and a team that's going to need him to throw a lot. He could be a top 2 or 3 option at the position.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go that far saying he's
like, I'm just saying, if he hits his ceiling, if everything goes right,
yeah.
Like, him being like we saw it a couple of years ago, where he was the MVP, was one of the best options in all of fantasy, and those were the years that he went. It's funny. It seems like the years that everybody expects him to be good, he kind of just whatevers, and the years that they don't expect him to be good is the year he explodes. But I'm just saying, like, his range of outcomes, like, I feel like worst case scenario, he's a 12 to 15 guy, which is where you're going to have to draft him at.
Yep.
And best case scenario, he finishes as the top option at the position. Calvin Ridley goes nuts. Kyle Pitts goes nuts. Russell Gage takes a step up. And you're looking at 4,500 yards and 40-ish touchdowns.
Yeah, no, I think that's where it's most important to kind of look at this from terms of like the position scarcity and what the scoring differential is going to be. I mean, I'm looking at Fantasy Pros right now and like average points per game. Matt Ryan was 15th in that last season at 18.3. And then you move up the list to Lamar Jackson, who was 10th at 22.8. So you're only looking at a 4 point difference, 4.5 point difference on a week to week basis. And that's not something that you're going to overreact to or think that oh man, I got to get this guy, this top 10 guy, as opposed to somebody that I could get later in the draft. And
Yeah.
then, Matt Ryan, like you said, is going to have those weeks with these weapons, with this defense, where he's going to have to throw the ball 40, 50 times, put up 400 plus yards and the potential of 3 to 4 touchdowns. So when looking at that in terms of where he's going, for me, he's a great option. If you're doing what I've actually done a few times, been the last person to take a quarterback in one of my last couple picks. And like you said, your investment is not one that you're unwilling to drop this guy for somebody better if he's just not putting up the points either.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're shooting for high upside when you're waiting this
Yeah.
long. Like, especially if you're in a 2 quarterback league and you're looking for more stability, Ryan's also a great option there. But some of the other names we're going to talk about might not be as stable
No.
as what Matt Ryan is. But if you're looking, you're like, I need a quarterback one that I trust, but I also don't want to rush to draft him. Matt Ryan makes a ton of sense. Let's talk about the first name on your list, and that's Cam Newton, QB 27 over. He's 164 overall. Talk to me about your kind of expectations for Cam in 2021.
Well, this one is slightly more based on me thinking that, yes, the Patriots, they drafted Mac Jones, but with Bill Belichick, he does not like rookies. He's shown it throughout his career of being a head coach. Rookies do not see the field for him. So I do not think that there's a chance we see Mac Jones in anything more than the occasional, let's throw a bomb here, we need a Hail Mary type of role. And, looking at Cam Newton's seasons last year, he posted career lows in pass attempts, pass yards, pass touchdowns, and the passing touchdowns one I think is the most glaring. He only threw for 8, which was 10 less than his career low of 18. So I just don't think that you're going to see that poor of a performance. And then, yes, he ran for 12 TDs, which is the second most of his career, but he averages around 6 to 8 every season. And let's not forget, he signed late in training camp last year. There was no practicing leading up to the beginning of the season. He dealt with COVID in the middle of the season. This team had so many opt-outs on defense. They were out of the playoff hunt, 2/3 of the way through. I just think that with the additions of Hunter Henry, with Nelson, I guess he can catch Aguilar coming into New England. I think we see a much better Patriots offense. They're getting their defensive pieces back. I think Cam Newton, with a full offseason to help recoup and repair that shoulder, is going to get back to near of what we kind of expect of him. And if he even approaches 15 to 18 passing touchdowns with the upside of 10 rushing touchdowns, he eclipses the top 10 mark at the position, and somebody that you're currently getting at QB 28 or QB 27 on FF Calculator, you can wait till the last pick of your draft to get a guy who is a weekly QB 1. So
yeah, no, I like the call. I think it's very interesting to see what New England does, because you're right. Like, even when they had Brady, they're like, oh no, we're gonna roll with the veteran. We're gonna roll with the veteran, and then obviously they had to make the switch. It'll be interesting because they did use that first round capital on Mac to see if they are a little more aggressive. But I'm kind of with you. I think Cam Newton could be really interesting.
yeah,
He's somebody that provides that weekly rushing floor, has that 10 rushing touchdown upside, and then
yep.
if his passing attempts are closer to 500 instead of closer to 350,
Yeah.
you're looking at a guy who throws for over 3,000 yards, who could put on 15 to 20 more touchdowns that way. I mean,
Yep.
35 40 touchdown season between rushing and passing, I mean, that doesn't seem crazy. Adding Kendrick Bourne, adding Nelson Aguilar, while they're not the game changers, one wide receiver 1-2 combos that a lot of teams have. When you factor in that they have Jonnu Smith, they have Hunter Henry, that they have so much of their passing game is going to kind of filter to those 4. It makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of variety. And Cam's a guy that's shown the ability over the years to just kind of be fine with whoever is catching passes, as long as they're putting in the work. So there's a different. And then doesn't even mention Jacoby Myers, who was kind of an interesting option last year that seems to be garnering a lot of attention. And like we talked about with most of the, we're going to keep her, I think, sound like a broken record a little bit, but if we start going through training camp and it looks like Mac Jones is going to be the guy, then you pivot off of Cam.
Yeah, exactly.
If you start it, if you draft him and you use him for a week or two, and the Patriots offense is kind of struggling, and the word out of camp is they're probably going to make the switch, then you make the switch yourself. You throw him
Exactly.
back to the pile. You go back to the other plethora of names. You find a good matchup against a bad defense, and you go on your way. So he's another guy that, we could be like, oh, can you believe Cam Newton was QB7 this year? It's crazy, but like it doesn't seem like his ceiling, if everything clicks, if everything goes right, he could be a top 10 to 12 guy. And if, like you said, you're getting him basically QB30, I think it's a nice risk to take.
Yeah, and real quick, he was just behind Matt Ryan in fantasy points per game at 18 per game. So
Yeah.
you're looking at almost no difference between these guys and the like the back end of the top 10. There's very minute amount of points separating these dudes, just a few touchdowns.
Yeah, and you're looking at Cam Newton, who would, spell time with Jarrett Stidham or whatever. So, like, he didn't even really play a full season. So it'll be interesting to see, with a whole offseason to get everything. The second guy on my list, Daniel Jones. I'm gonna sound.
You are in love with this
I'm
guy.
singing his praises. But like, if we want to talk about a quarterback who's gonna potentially make the leap, Daniel Jones is absolutely that guy. Of the guys, that I think we're talking about, I think he has an incredibly high ceiling. This is an offense that added Kenny Golladay. They obviously still have Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, a healthy Evan Ingram who played 16 games last year, Saquon, who hopefully makes things better for him, opens things up. But the thing about Daniel Jones is like he has that safe rushing floor that week to week will keep you afloat, even on the games where he doesn't throw as well. He could add in the rushing touchdowns. He could throw for a bunch. I'm really excited to see what he could look like this year with Kenny G, with that passing offense. And he feels like the guy that, I'm not going to say he's like Lamar or Mahomes, but like they took a tremendous step once, or even Josh Allen last year. We saw what happened with Josh Allen when he got legit weapons around him and they
Yeah.
put pieces around him to help him, be a more productive quarterback. I'm not saying Daniel Jones is always going to be in the MVP conversation, but if he's a top 5-ish fantasy quarterback at the end of the season, I'm not going to be shocked one bit.
Yeah, no, this is one I could totally get on board with, especially considering I had Daniel Jones in my top 12 at the beginning of last season, kind of expecting him to take that leap last year, with Saquon and with Slayton and all those guys on the outside. We expected this offense to look much better than it did, especially it was a big hit losing Saquon Barkley. If Barkley's healthy for the whole season, like you said, they have probably the second best, if not right there with Washington, the best defense in the division. So they'll be facing Dallas and Philadelphia twice this season, who both defense, kind of mediocre. Yeah. And now, like you said, with Kenny G on the outside, that adds a whole new dynamic to this offense. And we saw what Eli Manning was able to do with a Plexico, who just a big bodied guy who goes up and just dominates dudes in man coverage. I think this is the kind of receiver that'll really help a Daniel Jones. And his rushing upside, I mean, last year he ran for over 400 yards.
Yep.
He had that like 80-yard run where he stumbled over his own feet close to the goal line. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to see. And the main thing with these guys is you're taking them so far back in your draft or as a QB2 that you're not investing anything in them, and they all have the potential to boom. So
yeah,
I think
as much fun as we make of Jason Garrett and his clapping, he's actually, from a play caller perspective, he knows what he's doing. He runs a lot of plays. There is a chance this is a much more productive offense, and I expect Daniel Jones to take tremendous strides. I think there's a legitimate chance that we're talking about 3 NFC East quarterbacks as part of the top 12 come season's end. Daniel Jones, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
And then we'll see what the rest look like. But I'm on board with Daniel Jones. I'm going to be banging the drum for him all off season long, and we'll see how it goes. The final guy on the list, Brian. Sammy Darnold, QB 32, 221 overall. I feel like we've talked about him a few times, but I love this call as well.
Yeah, this is another one, like you were saying. When looking at weapons, if they're being drafted extremely high, how are we then assuming that the quarterback, the person that's going to be getting them the ball, is not also going to be producing fantasy relevant numbers? And I think there's no better case than the the variance in draft position than this right here. Sam Darnold is playing on a team with Christian McCaffrey, who's the overall number one guy in the majority of fantasy football drafts. DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are both going within the top 25, top 20, top 30 at the position.
Mm.
Um, you know, it to me, this is crazy to think that Sam Darnold isn't going to be able to put up a career year for an offense that wants to get the ball out. We saw Teddy Bridgewater be extremely efficient last year. I love the additions on the outside. They drafted Terrence Marshall Jr. to replace Curtis Samuel. I think that's going to be really big. And just again, QB 32, 221 overall, not even being
Yeah.
drafted. I just
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
understand.
I trust Joe Brady. I think he has a lot, a lot of confidence and a lot of interesting play calling, and I think he can take kind of Carolina to that next level. And I think they picked Sam Darnold for a reason. They said, come here, your skills plus these receivers. We saw Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore be awesome last year, and then
Yep.
as you mentioned, they had 3 top 25 wide receivers and half point scoring last year. Now, we would like to see, Sam become even better than what Teddy was last year. The return of Christian McCaffrey should be a big part of helping that. Um, but yeah, I mean, he's another guy that, I mean, he has a high pedigree, right? He was drafted high for a reason. People have high expectations of him. Yes, it hasn't come to fruition, and that's not ideal. But I don't think that means that it can't come to fruition, or that a change of scenery isn't going to be just the ticket to kind of unlock what he can be. Now, if he sees ghosts in the first couple weeks and looks horrible, and the offense is struggling, then he once again punt on him, find another
Yep.
option. But if you want to wait at quarterback, if you want to be patient, like honestly, if you're in a super flex league and it's pure redraft, I don't hate coming out of your super flex drafts with a combination of, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, and Cam Newton. Like those are your guys, and you're rotating them through. Obviously, would you prefer to have a Baker or a Matt Ryan to kind of be that one, and then kind of have
Yeah.
a couple of the other guys to rotate around? Sure. But if you're not drafting quarterback, you're drafting other positions, and you're loading up on receivers and running backs and higher upside guys, and then you figure out quarterback. And that's the thing about if it's a super flex league and not a 2 quarterback league, you can always play one of your badass receivers or running backs there. So don't sweat on that, Brian. I wanted to throw out a few other names. Obviously, those are our main call outs, but there is some interesting options as you kind of roll down the road. If you're looking for stability, Kirk Cousins is absolutely that name. We Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Irv Smith, Dalvin Cook. Like there's just so much talent. He was awesome last year. Makes a lot of sense. Big Ben's a guy that has, if you want to shoot for the moon, like he could be broken and look like garbage. But if you want to shoot for the moon as a guy who can legitimately throw 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns,
Yep.
Roethlisberger with Juju, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, bringing in Najee. Like he's a guy that I think has tremendous upside.
Yeah, and again, with the name like Roethlisberger, look at who he's throwing the ball to,
Yeah.
and to not think that that's a possibility for him to encroach upon or even get near the top 5 at the position is crazy to me.
Yeah. Um, Trevor Lawrence is also somebody that I've been kind of racking my brain a little bit about. Um, it's interesting because we think Jacksonville, so like garbage, right? And their offense might be. I'm not really sure what to think of Urban, but if you think of just the fact that like he's going around, Trey Lance and around Justin Fields, um, and he's like Fields, we'll see if he starts. It sounds like Dalton's at least starting from the jump. We'll see what happens in San Francisco. Trevor Lawrence, we know he's starting. And we have
Yeah.
Laviska Shenault and Marvin Jones and DJ Chark and the combination of James Robinson and Travis Etienne. This is an offense that could really be super sneaky. And, if you want to, especially if you're in like some sort of best ball where you want to do some stacking opportunities, Jacksonville might be okay, especially if their defense isn't very good and they have to throw a lot. Trevor Lawrence, in terms of upside, in terms of potential, he's on the Peyton Manning, John Elway, Andrew Luck, path of this guy has the potential to be a Hall of Famer from day one. So I don't know. He's somebody that's becoming a little more interesting to me as we've kind of marched towards the season.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, especially playing for such a bad team. Like, there's going to be lots of opportunity to throw. I want to voice my worry of Urban Meyer running the show down there, because the Buckeyes are not going to be beating people 60-10. One of the guys that I think is really being underappreciated right now, and that's the potential of what Jimmy Garoppolo can do for San Francisco if he remains the starter here this season. He was somebody you were on last year, Kyle. All these weapons are going to be healthy. Again, we have a full off season. Garoppolo will be healthy. He's getting all those weapons on the outside back fully healthy. Kittle, Debo, Ayuk, the running back room is just going to be even better with the addition of Trey Sermon. And San Francisco is looking like they're going to be a Super Bowl contender once again if that defense can stay on the field. So I think that Jimmy Garoppolo, again, is another guy at the back end of drafts or even after a draft, signing him as a free agent, somebody to keep on as a QB2 or in a super flex league for sure.
Yeah, and you could honestly draft Trey Lance and then draft Jimmy G and kind of hold on to both of them, and then they'll be one of your first cuts as you head into the season, because there's that first couple waiver wire periods. You're always looking for players to cut, so that could be an interesting way. Because 2 years ago, this is a QB he was QB 14 in 2019. He has tremendous upside, as you mentioned. A full year of healthy Kittle, a full year of Debo and Ayuk. Like, those two guys didn't even play together last year. Between the two of them, one of them was always hurt. So there's a lot of Mohamed Sanu. We'll see. The running back position, as you mentioned, Trey Sermon, Raheem Mostert, still a lot of talent there. But yeah, this is a guy that he went into New Orleans, threw for 400 yards. Like, that's in his range of outcomes. So he's another guy that I'm optimistic about. And if you think, people are going a little too, a little gaga for Lance and forgetting that Jimmy G, which, being this close to the Bay Area, I think Jimmy G starting the whole season is not that crazy. Like, obviously, especially for Lance, who we saw play 12 games in college.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of potential there.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
And in terms of dynasty, I love him there, but we could easily see a Mahomes-like situation where he basically rides the bench for the whole season. Jimmy G plays a little bit better than we expect. That Niners team is ready to win a Super Bowl. So if Shanahan feels better about where Jimmy G is at this point, and they could have gotten rid of him very easily if the plan was just to roll with Lance and save themselves about $20 million. Now they could trade him to a team that loses their quarterback, or maybe Denver's interested or something. Or Houston, if we find out Deshaun's just not going to happen.
I just don't see this situation as being anywhere near the same thing we saw in Miami last year, where the Dolphins were playing 500 ball with Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
And then they just said, oh, nope, it's Tua's team. Like, I do not see that as a possibility for the San Francisco.
That whole situation was weird. They kind of bounced back and forth and had Fitzpatrick coming in the fourth quarter, and it doesn't seem good for either guy. No. Speaking of upside guys, Tua Tagovailoa is another one that makes a lot of sense. Okay, Brian, this is a lot of fun. Talk some quarterbacks, talk some of our sleepers. Let us know down in the comments on YouTube. Who's your favorite option? Who's your favorite guy going outside of, say, QB 15 or so on Fantasy Pros? If you're listening on Spotify or Stitcher or iTunes, feel free to hit us up on Twitter at NotoriousKRO, at GreasyRules14. For Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.